We just had the craziest free agency of our lifetime. Players going here, there, everywhere. Shout out to Dr. Seuss. But today we're going to be talking about the good, bad, and ugly from all the major free agency signings. We're joined by two special co-hosts. Let's get into it. We're going to start here with the players that were franchise tagged but haven't been extended or traded at the moment. T. Higgins is the first guy, and of course he got the franchise tag. Excuse me, but this is a guy that immediately said, "Hey, that's not enough for me. I want more money. I'm going to request a trade." So he's currently on the trade market, at least at the moment. Do you guys believe there's any chance this guy returns to the Cincinnati Bengals?
Me personally, I thought since he handled this really bad, I think they should have at least, discussed some sort of deals or like restructured deals throughout the year so it wouldn't get to this point. Personally, I'm not really sure, I think Cincy at this point, since they lost Mixon and Tyler Boyd, since they're going to lose Boyd, I think they might try to, fix the relationship between them and, try to talk something out to eventually, extend the contract. But as of right now, I think he's gone.
Yeah, I agree with that. As of right now, I don't see a way that that they convince him to try and at least come back through this next season so they can still continue to work out that a long-term contract for him. Obviously we know the talent T. Higgins is and what he means to this Bengals offense, especially an offense that just lost Joe Mixon. They're going to lose Tyler Boyd. The rumors are out there that there's might be something in motion for Justin Jefferson, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase duo once again. But regardless if those rumors are true or not, I don't see T Higgins in this picture anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You took the words out of my mouth there, Bakari. Justin Jefferson, of course, there's been some rumors going around. It's a long shot, so we're not going to dive too much into it. But T. Higgins, as of right now, is a Cincinnati Bengal. I do think I agree with Amir. I think he will be back for another season, but that might be it. Oh, Amir, you said he was going to be traded. Regardless, a team like the Bears should be in the market for a guy like T. Higgins so they can open up their draft boards at number 9 to go get a defensive player, of course, to help out on that side of the ball. But as of right now, T. Higgins is frustrated. For the rest of these, Bakari, Amir, cut me off, please, if you want to talk about anybody on these lists because we got a lot of players to go through. But Josh Allen, of course, not the quarterback, but still maybe one of the best edges in the game. 26 years old. He was franchise tagged, rightfully so. We talked about that last week where we said, hey, Jacksonville cannot let this guy go. But of course, career highs across the board. Of course, here in the bottom left, if you see it's highlighted in green, it's a career high or it's a career moment. Josh Allen, of course, had a career year. L'Jarius Sneed, he was tagged by the Kansas City Chiefs, rightfully so. They don't have a lot of money, but they brought back one of the best corners in the game, and he's going to be a pivotal part of that Kansas City defense. Antoine Winfield, a guy that was an all-pro first team last year, but didn't make the Pro Bowl. Doesn't make a lot of sense, kind of like that LeBron, Marc Gasol, Defensive Player of the Year situation. Of course, you guys know that. But career highs across the board, as you see. He was tagged by Todd Bowles and the Tampa Bay Bucks. Again, rightfully so. And the last one we have here is Kyle Duggar, 27 years old. He had 109 tackles at the safety position last year. We know he plays in the box, but when your safety leads your team in tackles, that means the front seven's not doing their job. So New England has a lot of questions, but bringing back Kyle Duggar, very underrated franchise tag here in 2023. Now we want to talk about the players that were traded this offseason, and this is where I'm going to get a lot more of your guys' insight. We're going to start here with the big one. Brian Burns from the Carolina Panthers to the New York Giants on Monday, and he was immediately extended. 5 years, $150 million. Of course, he didn't have a great year last year statistically, but when you're the only option on that defensive line, you're going to be double teamed a lot. Brian Burns, though, 25 years old, middle of his peak, I guess a good way to put it, or start of his peak. Amir, your thoughts here about this trade and I guess who won the trade?
I think Carolina won this trade. Even though they got rid of a great D lineman, I mean they kind of avoid, sort of falling into that financial debt where we're seeing a lot of teams trying to build around their franchise quarterback. And so I think for Carolina they honestly won because at this point you see now, I mean they're going after guys to help build around Bryce Young offensively. The defense you can always figure it out. Try to have some scheme changes and adjust, but offensively, right now it's important for year two to really build around your franchise guys. I think they won.
Yeah, for me, it's it's weird because they trade him to the Giants, who, you know, the Giants don't have a whole lot going for them right now. I think this is obviously the best thing they've done this whole entire, you know, free agency. They lost Saquon, you know, they haven't, you know, really brung in a whole lot of pieces to really make their team look like, oh, hey, you know, we might compete for something this year. But, you know, on the other hand, the Panthers they have made steps in the right direction, like Amir said, to bring in Bryce Young some help, you know, on the online. They traded for, you know, receivers, you know, they're building in the right direction. So I guess when you take it to that account, I guess the Panthers, you know, you could say the Panthers won this trade. Like I mentioned, you know, the Giants have a, you know, that you know, front seven is crazy, but you know what's going on outside of that is I don't really understand the Giants trading for him, because like I said, it's not like he was a piece of he was a missing piece to, you know, move them into like contending or anything like that. You still have a whole lot to figure out if you're the Giants.
Yeah, absolutely. You do have pick number 6 in this upcoming draft. Maybe a guy like Malik Neighbors, or maybe, hey, you'd shock the world, trade for a guy like Jaden Daniels there in the top 3. Of course, a lot of options for this Giants offense, but for defensively, I mean, they have Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns. So a great defensive line for them going forward. And of course, they have some solid pieces in the secondary, but huge draft coming up for Brian Daboll and company. Joe Mixon, this is the guy that was cut but later traded to the Houston Texans from the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about him earlier, but again, he's going to the Texans on a cheap deal, 1 year, $8 million to finish off his rookie deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, rather. But your guys' thoughts here about this move for the Texans and the Bengals. Who won the trade for you guys?
Man, the Houston Texans won this trade big time. And, you know, I think, you know, in my honest opinion, I think the Texans are the biggest winners in free agency right now. And this is one of the biggest reasons why, Cincy, Cincy right now is honestly depleting offensively. And, you know, I think the Texans honestly stole Joe Mixon, you know, even though the running back market is extremely low. I mean, Cincy has no running back now, really. I mean, no true number 1 running back. And so I think for Houston, I
Zach
mean, they're
Moss?
literally maybe who? And so, you know, I think at this point, you know, this honestly made Houston one piece away from being like a true legitimate contender.
Yeah, I agree with you. The moves the Texans have made all offseason have been, you know, D'Amico Ryans, as you can tell, he's really had a lot of say in how he wanted to build his team from the jump, even including last year's free agency in draft into this year's free agency. We haven't even seen how they're going to draft, but you know, all the moves they've made over the past about year and a half have been in the right direction, you know, and Joe Mixon just adds to that. Like Amir said, the Bengals are depleting offensively, you know, losing Joe Mixon. T. Higgins is on his way out, Tyler Boyd. So the fact that you're able to steal Joe Mixon from the Bengals on a 1 year, $8 million contract, you know, given what other running backs are being paid and what their other contracts are looking like, you know, this is a total win for them. A lot of people were saying Saquon was going to go there. You know, Saquon ends up going to the Eagles, but you know, you get Joe Mixon, you get somebody who can help you out in the pass game, and you get somebody who's a proven runner of the football in this league. Houston's going to be scary, especially if C.J. Stroud takes those leaps that everybody expects them to take. This is going to be a scary team for years to come.
Yeah, I was going to circle back to the point you just made there, Bacario. Of course, it's not Saquon, but it's not that far off, at least as far as a 1 year rental from Joe Mixon. So great pickup there. Deontay Johnson, this happened the most recently, and of course is a huge move for Carolina. Like we mentioned, the team is helping out the young quarterback, but they traded Pittsburgh traded Deontay Johnson to Carolina for really a day 3 pick. Really nothing was in that deal for Pittsburgh and Carolina overall, but Carolina gets the receiver. They get their wide receiver 1 next to Adam Thielen. They still have some young receivers there. Of course, they signed Robert Hunt. We'll talk about that later. And of course, they have some draft picks coming up in the 2nd and 3rd rounds where they can really continue to build around Bryce Young. But Amir, there's been a history that when Steelers, they've had a perfect history of moving off receivers at the right time. Antonio Brown, they got rid of him. He ended up falling off. Of course, Juju Smith, they got rid of him, and he hasn't been the same since. Deontay Johnson now, he's getting moved from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Does that trend continue, or do you think Deontay Johnson can tap into another mode for his career going forward now as he's a wide receiver 1 in Carolina?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure, you know, because with, you know, Deontay Johnson, you know, we kind of saw these past 2 years, you know, even though they drafted George Pickens, I mean, he was the number 1 receiver and he completely took a step back. And so, for Carolina, it's like, it's a lot of problems with Deontay Johnson. This past season, we've seen a lot of locker room issues, effort issues, drop passes as well. And so for him, I'm not really sure. And, if I had to choose who won this trade, if I'm not mistaken, didn't, they ended up trading Dante Jackson as
Yes,
well?
Dante
Pittsburgh?
Jackson.
Yeah, and I understand completely that, I mean, you want to add around Bryce Young, but I mean, losing Dante Jackson, I mean, and Brian Burns, like that just depleted your defense a lot. And so, I think for Pittsburgh honestly might have won that trade because I'm looking at Pittsburgh's defense. They might have the best defense in football now. I mean, you got Joey Porter on the other side of Dante Jackson now. Up front, I mean, the up front seven is absolutely stacked. So, I think, you're a lot more confident with having Dante Jackson on that team than Deontay Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Pittsburgh won that trade. You move off of Deontay Johnson, who, like you said, Owen, it seems like the Steelers move off of people at the perfect time. I could argue that Deontay Johnson probably had an argument to be moved the past,
Yeah.
1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
So, the fact that they're doing it now helps them out. But I will say from the Panthers' perspective, you bring in somebody who has these known issues and who has these these known problems within another organization. You bring them in for cheap with no picks. You do trade Dante Jackson, but I guess the hope there is that you say, hey, this is somebody who's been in the league for a while. We need at least a few threats around our young quarterback who really struggled last year. Maybe Deontay Johnson can come in, have a new mindset, and give you a better year than what he's shown he can give you these few previous years when he's their number one target, presumably. So I guess from the Panthers' perspective, that's what they're saying, because Deontay Johnson still holds that name value of like, hey, you got to watch out for him, you got to guard him. But the overall trade wise, I think Pittsburgh did win this trade.
No, absolutely. I agree with you guys. Pittsburgh has a history of moving off, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a 1-year rental, but it might be a pivotal 1-year rental where Bryce Young, if he can develop, that's what their focus is this year. It's not about winning games. Of course, that would be a plus. This year, it's about the development of their young quarterback, and of course, again, wins would just be a plus. So even if they have the same record, but they develop and Bryce Young looks like a franchise guy, that is the key for Carolina this year. At least in my opinion. Of course, you guys might think they're Super Bowl contenders. Mac Jones, he was the first bombshell that happened. He was traded to Jacksonville from New England, a guy that had career lows across the board last year. He was 2-9. He had only about 2,000 total yards in 11 games, 10 touchdowns, but 12 interceptions. A guy that didn't have a great season, right? He obviously needed a change of scenery, and I still believe in him. I don't think he's a franchise guy, but I think he could be a Gardner Minshew kind of player where he can be a spot start quarterback and occasionally win you some games. I will say, first year he was a rookie, and that was when he had the most help. After that, his team kind of depleted the last 2 years. New England didn't help him at all. But your guys' thoughts here, I'll start with you, Amir. Do you think it's a good move, or I guess I'll ask you, who won this trade, as he's just really being traded to be a backup?
I mean, personally, I thought, this was probably one of the most pointless trades.
Yeah.
For both sides, just for the simple fact, I mean, Jackson only had to give him a 6th rounder. I think if you trade your starting two, you at least get something more valuable, something better. And I think if I had to pick who won this trade, I'd probably say Jacksonville, just for the simple fact that it's like, I mean, they only give up a 6th rounder, and now you can kind of get a guy to help push Trevor Lawrence and kind of like, give him some more motivation, for him to actually play better this year. So I'll probably lean towards Jacksonville.
Yeah, not too much for me to say here either. You only give up a 6th rounder for Mac Jones, and regardless if your plan wasn't to start him obviously this year because you have Trevor Lawrence, it's somebody who his rookie year he showed he could play in the league. Obviously, like you mentioned, Owen, the Patriots year after year depleted their roster. He really didn't have anything going for him on the offensive side of the football. So the thought process there is, hey, we bring in this guy who, he's shown he can play a little bit in the league. And, if Trevor ever has to, unlike last year where Trevor Lawrence kind of played through that injury the second half of the season and battled that injury, you could say, hey, Mac Jones, can you come in and play 2 to 3 games for us and kind of just let Trevor heal? And, the hope is Mac Jones will be able to get your team W's during that stretch. So I not too much to say there.
At the very worst, he's going to be one of the best backups in the league, and I think that's a plus. Traded for a guy like Mac Jones, a guy that was a top 10 pick just a few years ago. Same draft class as Trevor Lawrence, by the way. But Jerry Jeudy, the biggest offseason acquisition, the biggest game-changing, team rostering, altering. I'm just joking. But Jerry Jeudy was traded from the Broncos to the Browns, a guy that's at Alabama, was an elite route runner and just really changed the game at Alabama, won them a national title. He comes to the league and he just hasn't had much success. Again, he hasn't had great quarterback selection up until Russell Wilson, but they just never clicked on the field. But he gets traded to the Cleveland Browns. He's going to be the number 2 behind Amari Cooper, hopefully a much better Deshaun Watson. Amir, I'll start with you. Do you think there's any chance he can revitalize his career and be, maybe the Jerry Jeudy people thought he could be coming into the league?
I wouldn't say revitalized, but I think slightly more productive. Not to a higher scale because he's coming to be a number 2 receiver. But I think I'd say, Jerry Jeudy, and the Browns won this trade. The Broncos, I don't know what they're doing. I understand Jerry Jeudy, isn't living up to his expectations, but he's way better than a 5th and a 6th round pick. And so now it's kind of like, the Browns receiving corps is finally starting to actually look competent, aside from Amari Cooper. And so I think Cleveland and Jerry Jeudy won this trade with the easy steal.
Yeah, once again, I agree there. Obviously as Browns fans, we watched time and time again last year where if Amari Cooper was hurt or playing through an injury or wasn't out on the field, and David Njoku wasn't out on the field as well. It's like we were throwing the guys like Harrison Bryant a lot, like too much, too many times than we can count. So obviously you bring in Jerry Jeudy, who, the hope obviously there is that he brings a lot of value for that number 2, for that wide receiver 2 spot. And I think that's what you'll get out of Jerry. I don't think you'll get anything too crazy, but somebody who you can consistently go to when Amari Cooper is out the game. And, not to mention, you still have got like Elijah Moore on the roster. Elijah Moore was somebody who, up until that concussion game versus the Jets, I think Joe Flacco was, he looked like he was about to have a legacy game. So, like Amir said, the Browns receiver room is really starting to look like it can be a threat. The hope is that our backup quarterback doesn't have to play for us to use all of our playmakers out on the field. The hope is Deshaun Watson can find, the pieces we bring in for him. So
I think
as long as that happens, yeah.
I think you guys are forgetting our starting quarterback is going to be James Winston. It's not going to be Deshaun. No, I'm just
eating dubs.
The big signing.
J-Ball, let's go, baby. Comeback player of the year. Comeback player of the year.
I think comeback player of the year. He's, if not, he's going to be a receiver. He might just be like a Braxton Miller for us. He might just go out there and play some receiver. Okay, that's crazy. But,
no, that's crazy.
But Jerry Jeudy, I think at the bare minimum, he's going to put a lot of pressure on the defensive backfield for any team that we play. Of course, in this stacked AFC North, we need as much help as we can get. And if Watson's back, I think Jeudy can return to form just a little bit, at least. And then that's all we can ask for, especially it's a buy low trade. When you have a buy low trade, you just want to see some production out of him. The only guy left that we expected to be traded, but he hasn't been yet, is Justin Fields. And of course, I joked about Braxton Miller, but I've seen some Bears fans saying, hey, maybe we just draft Caleb Williams and have Justin Fields be like a flex guy, like a Braxton Miller or Terrell Pryor, where he goes to play receiver. That's crazy to me, right? Justin Fields is the quarterback in this league.
Right.
But this is a guy that did have, a career low in interceptions last year. He did have a career high in total yards in about 2,500.
Man, that looked like Mac Jones numbers. No,
it kind of does. It kind of does. But Justin Fields, hey, this is a guy that, we thought he was going to be traded to Atlanta. We thought then, okay, not Atlanta because Kirk Cousins, he gets traded to the Raiders. But then they signed Gardner Minshew. They have like 4 quarterbacks in Las Vegas now. We don't know where this dude's going to go. We thought even Pittsburgh. But then they got Russell Wilson. We don't know where this guy's going to go. But what we do know is that he's not going to be on the Chicago Bears. So Justin Fields, still interesting to see where he will end up in 2024. But starting here at the quarterback position, we're going to talk about all these major free agency signings. And we're going to start here with Kirk Cousins, 4-year, $180 million contract. He is 35, so this is seemingly his last deal of his career. But last year, he had just a solid year before he got hurt. Of course, the Vikings started off the year rough in the record side of things, but they started to pick it up, and then Kirk Cousins went down. But he goes to this loaded offense in Atlanta, with guys like Kyle Pitts, guys like Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Darnell Mooney. Now they signed in free agency. We'll talk about him later. They have a defense, and they have the number 8 pick where they can grab a Dallas Turner. This team is set to be scary next year. But Amir, I'm going to go to you here. Do you think it was an overpay for Atlanta because Kirk Cousins only had one playoff win in his 12-year career.
Yeah, I think this is great for Atlanta. But the problem is, just like you just mentioned, the contract. I mean, 180 mil for 4 years, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago. We're not as worried about an Achilles injury for a guy that's not mobile to begin with. But I mean, at the same time, that's still risky, and he's still going to be 39 years old. And it's not like he's some generational talent like Aaron Rodgers, where when he comes back, his arm talent's still going to be there. He's still going to be elite. I mean, Kirk Cousins is good, but I mean, one playoff win in 12 years is still kind of concerning. And, I cover him. I believe, I still have high hopes for him. I think he's still going to be good when he comes back. But I mean, 180 mil, eventually you're going to have to start like moving some players around and making some cuts and stuff within those next 4 years. So it's going to be rough.
Yeah, this is one of those signings where it's like in the moment, and the hope is that you get the old Kirk back. It's a good signing. Obviously, the 4 years may be a little bit too long. Maybe you gave him a 2 or 3 year contract with less money, but more guaranteed. Maybe you can kind of shape some things up. But to me, if I'm the Falcons, I probably would have tried to go after Russell Wilson. That's a team friendly deal that you knew you're going to get. Obviously, the Broncos are paying his contract pretty much for this season. You give him the vet minimum. It gives you a lot of room to maneuver, especially this year. And depending on what happens this year, you could give him maybe another short term deal. And he'll be comfortable there. Or I would have probably just preferred to trade for a younger quarterback like Justin Fields. You either want to compete or you either want to help your team, progress better with a younger quarterback like Justin Fields. Obviously, no dirt to Kirk. I think he's a good player before the injury. Hopefully he can come back. But 39 for a quarterback with one playoff win who, Kirk is good, but it's not like he's like Peyton Manning or Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or one of those guys. So, his 39 might look different than Tom Brady's 39 or Aaron Rodgers is 39 or so. We'll have to see the full 4 years to see the extent of this contract.
Yeah, to clarify on my end, I think it was a good signing, but to clarify, yeah, I think it also should have been a 2 or 3 year deal, to see, hey, this is what we got. Again, like you guys mentioned, he's not a mobile quarterback, so he should be fine when he comes back. But again, Bakari, you just touched on a great point. His 39 is not going to look like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady's, and Aaron Rodgers is 39. It's just not, there's levels to this. And Kirk Cousins is going to be good. He's going to be an above average quarterback, but do you want to pay an above average quarterback 40 or 50, $60 million a year? That's not what you want to do. So Kirk Cousins is a guy that's it's going to be definitely a wait and see situation. But like you guys mentioned, it's a good signing at the moment. I just wish it was maybe a year or two less for the Atlanta side of things. Baker Mayfield, another guy that's a big free agent quarterback on the market. He signed an extension, 3-year, $100 million deal, career year across the board last year, 4,000 yards plus, 28 touchdowns, basically no interceptions. 10 interceptions is a decent amount, but for Baker Mayfield, 10 interceptions is good. And of course, he made his first Pro Bowl. So Baker Mayfield finally turning that page. Amir, your thoughts about Baker Mayfield?
I think Tampa Bay finally found their guy. And it's crazy. I'm looking at this contract and I'm kind of like, I mean, it's not that bad compared to Kirk Cousins.
You're right.
And I mean, 100 mil, and that's still a lot of money, but I mean, according to the QB market right now, when you're investing in your franchise guy, it's not bad for Tampa Bay. I think Baker earned the contract. The only thing I'm concerned about is, I believe people are too focused on looking at the back end of the season. I mean, Baker was good in all the end of the season, but let's not forget, I mean, throughout the middle of that year, throughout the beginning of that year, I mean, he was struggling big time, and he looked like he was ended up going to get traded or end up, getting released after this season. And I think people are focusing too much on how we finished and didn't realize that it came to a point in the season where we were really questioning him and questioning his Bucs team. But it's good for Baker.
Yeah, I think the thing that happened this year is it's almost like when he was in Cleveland almost. The season he led the Browns to the playoffs. He obviously second half of the year, I think his last 11 games, if Skip Bayless, if my memory serves me correct and watching Undisputed, Skip Bayless, last 11 games of that season, he was phenomenal for Baker standards. He did the bare minimum of what he was supposed to do. He was complete his passes and not turn the ball over, and that's what he did, and that's what led the Browns to the playoffs. But at the beginning of that year, it's not like we saw a whole lot of drastic improvement from the previous year. It was almost like you were questioning Baker, like, okay, Baker, you got to really figure this out, or we're going to have to start asking questions about quarterback. Obviously, the next year he gets hurt and the Browns let him go. and he struggles the year after that, playing for a few different teams. But, like Amir, like you said, you kind of struggle at the beginning of the season, towards the middle of the season. But, it's always what they remember last about you. And that's what he finished the season off and what he did in the playoffs. And that's what gave him this contract. I think Baker at his best I think he's a good quarterback. I like watching Baker play. He's a gunslinger type of quarterback. But that's when he's playing at his best. When he's playing at his worst, as Browns fans, we know he does a few things, and it's just kind of like, man, Baker, what are you doing? You're trying to throw this game away for us. But the Bucs needed that stability, especially at that quarterback position, and you get it with Baker Mayfield. Not the best, but not the worst is what you can get. So I think it's for the Bucs, it's a good signing for them.
Yeah, I think it's a really good deal. And Baker Mayfield is just one of those guys where you hate him when you have him, but it's like one of those guys where you love to win with them. It's kind of like Russell Westbrook in the NBA. Nobody really wants him, but when you have him and you're winning with them, it's fun, and you want to
Everybody
support
wants
that
Russ.
guy. You said what?
Everybody wants Russ.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Maybe now that he's a role player, but that's off topic. Baker Mayfield's one of those guys that I'll stand on that hill where if he was still on the Browns and we were winning, it would feel better winning with Baker Mayfield than Deshaun Watson. But again, that's
Right.
because Deshaun Watson's just he hasn't got back to form yet. Russell Wilson, $1.2 million deal. You guys talked about it earlier. The Broncos are basically paying his salary. So he signs a vet minimum for the Steelers. This is where I predict him to go because I said, hey, it's the safest place for him to go and to win some football games. And he's going to do that here. Any additional thoughts from either of you guys?
I believe this is a win for Russ and Pittsburgh, even though it's only a 1 year, $1 million. I mean, I think Russ understands. I mean, well, one, he's getting paid, by Denver, and then, two, it's like he understands, like, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and take a 1 year or 1 year, $1 million deal. I understand my age, and I want to win now. So go ahead and load talent around me and build around me.
Yeah,
Man, he got an L agent. He could have got a 4-year, $180 million deal and really push the cap on. No, I'm playing, but I think this is. I think obviously Russ in Pittsburgh, this is a great deal for them. Contractually, 1 year, $1 million. It gives them a lot of flexibility. Like you've seen this year, it just kind of put a lot of pieces on both sides of the football to help this team go further. I mean, we saw Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph lead this team to the playoffs last year, and I think Russ had more touchdowns. What was it this season alone than Kenny Pickett has? I think for his career or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely insane to me. But shout out to Russ and Pittsburgh for getting that deal done.
Yeah, I mean, for reference, like Bakari was mentioning, Kenny Pickett only has 13 career touchdown passes in his career. Russell had double that last year, and most viewed it as a down year, and he missed some games at the end of the year. So I think it's definitely an upgrade, but again, brings him a lot of flexibility, and at the very worst, it's a 1 year mentor for a guy like Kenny Pickett. Gardner Minshew, he signed a 2 year, $25 million deal with the Raiders. Of course, had a career high in passing yards last year, made it to the Pro Bowl, and now they just have another mediocre quarterback joining the crew. It's him, Jimmy Garoppolo, Aiden O'Connell. Nobody knows who the quarterback's going to be for them, but we do know one thing: they're going to have a game manager. Sam Darnold, same thing here. He's 26 years old, so ideally in the prime of his career. This is a guy that signed a 1 year, $10 million deal with the Minnesota Vikings. I do think they're going to end up with J.J. McCarthy, but I think Sam Darnold could be a good mentor for whoever they draft here in 2024. And hey, maybe he revitalizes his career. Maybe he turns back into a starter, kind of like Geno Smith. I doubt it, but hey, he has the weapons to do that. At the running back position, this is a big one. Derrick Henry, 2 years, $16 million deal, long-time Titan. It seemed like he was a four-lifer, but I guess 2 kind of down statistical years. And now he's out the door for Tennessee. They moved on. They have a new chapter, and he goes to Baltimore. Kind of just like all the best Tennessee Titan players in their history all end up going to Baltimore. But Amir, your thoughts about this? How big is this for Baltimore? Does this push them over the edge for you?
This is huge, for Baltimore, and the fact that last year you made it that far with Gus Edwards, and you add Derrick Henry, a guy who's still. Stat-wise, it was down, but he still had great stats, behind one of the worst O-lines in the league. And, I'm not going to say it pushes them over the edge just yet because, you still got Patrick Mahomes in the AFC. And, exactly, the thing about, this Ravens team is like, they're honestly waiting on Lamar to develop as a pocket passer, in my opinion. And I think this Ravens team, when it comes down to it, you need an elite quarterback that can throw the ball in the NFL in today's age. And, Lamar's play style hasn't shown just yet it can get them over the edge. And so I think, even though Lamar's getting better year by year, I think, if Lamar can develop slightly better as a pocket passer going into this season, with Derrick Henry, this team could very much make a run. Very much make a run.
Yeah, I think Derrick Henry really brings another dynamic to this team. You still have Keaton Mitchell. Obviously, he's going to be coming off an injury, but what he was able to do last year when he touched the ball, he's a very gifted runner because he's so fast. When you give Derrick Henry that opposite punch, you're bringing in a brute strong runner, somebody who's just going to run straight through you. It's two different dynamics, and not to mention you still have Lamar Jackson who can run that football as well. Like Amir said, Lamar needs to develop as a pocket passer a little bit better. He's gotten better each season. If you watch tape from last year to like his rookie year, you see the huge steps he's taken, but he needs to get better. The reason that they weren't able to beat the Chiefs is not because to me personally, I think they still could have beat the Chiefs even if Lamar wasn't in the pocket. I think the problem was they didn't run the football, and that's Lamar himself. The type of running lanes that they had that were open that you could, visibly see while you're watching the game were crazy, and they just didn't utilize that. So the thing with Derrick Henry is you got to give him the ball. So I think that's what you got to do. They had Gus Edwards last year. Hopefully they learned their lesson that, hey, we got to give our running backs the ball when we get in those positions and not rely on Lamar to, make plays with his feet, even though that's what he does. But, you have another person who can help you out in that area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if Gus Edwards can rush for 13 touchdowns, imagine what Derrick Henry
Exactly.
can do. This is a dude that's going to have probably 20 plus next year. All right, moving over to Saquon Barkley. This is a big one. And then after this, we're going to fly through a lot of these. But of course, we got to talk about Saquon Barkley. 3-year, $38 million deal. He's had a couple down years, but he hasn't had much help around him to succeed. Regardless, Saquon Barkley, he wanted to be in a winning situation and he wanted money. He got both to sign with the Philadelphia Eagles. Amir, you're dead to me, right? You're dead to us. Your thoughts about this Saquon to Philly?
This is a great pickup for Philly. 38 mil for running backs nowadays is a lot. But we talked about the last week and the week before. Saquon, is the most talented back in the league, right? But the biggest concern is his health. And I think for Philly, I think they should find a way to like have him be productive, incorporate him in your offense, but also don't overload him, don't overuse him too much, to kind of kill him. But I think, this honestly gives this Eagles team hope. Like the end of the season last year, I mean, they looked like they were like grasping for air, looked like they were falling apart, mentally. The whole entire staff was falling apart. I think you're bringing a guy like Saquon, a guy that wants to win, that's hungry, that's a hard worker. This honestly brings a different culture to this team. So I think this helps them a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that. And even to the injury point, I think when you have Saquon and coming to this loaded Eagles team, you automatically it's always like he doesn't have as much pressure on him like he did when he was in New York. You have the receiving threats now. You have a quarterback. You have everything on that offensive side of the football that takes all that pressure off of you. So all you have to do is just produce. You don't have to worry about, getting ran into the ground. You don't have to worry about playing through this injury or that injury. You have weapons on your offensive side who can take that load off of you. Whether that's Jalen Hurts running the football, whether that's them throwing the ball. This Eagles offense is going to be so dynamic now, so much more dynamic when you have Saquon Barkley back there, because we all know the talent, and the hope is that he can stay on the field this year. And if he does just that, I think this Eagles team can, I think they have, obviously all the talent in the world to get right back to the Super Bowl like they were 2 seasons ago. So, I think this is a great signing for them.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Saquon Barkley. All I know is that if by the 0% chance that I do get Madden, I better not see you guys running with the Eagles. That's going to be a nightmare to play. Josh Jacobs, one of my favorite running backs in the league, 4-year, $48 million deal, signed with the Green Bay Packers. So Aaron Jones out, Josh Jacobs in, and of course they need to address this offensive line in the draft. But if they do that, this team's going to be pretty set going forward. A.J. Dillon is still a free agent. So right now, Josh Jacobs is really going to be the workhorse of this backfield. Aaron Jones, we just talked about him. He went from Green Bay to Minnesota. A lot of players going to other teams in the same division, but this is the guy that shared the backfield the last couple of years with A.J. Dillon. And Aaron Jones missed some time last year, but when he did play, he was electric. 1-year, $7 million deal. A dynamic offense there in Minnesota, no doubt about it. DeAndre Swift.
Who's the quarterback?
You said what?
Who's the quarterback?
J.J. McCarthy. I think J.J. McCarthy with Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, Ty Chandler, a top 5 offensive line. Minnesota's offense is going to be fun next year. DeAndre Swift
This is some good sleep I'm getting.
DeAndre Swift, 3-year, $24 million. Career year last year, 1.2 thousand yards total. Pro Bowl, of course, Pro Bowler DeAndre Swift goes to the Bears to pair up with Caleb Williams. Tony Pollard, 3-year, $24 million deal goes to the Titans. Of course, I guess they're kind of cooking something there in Tennessee.
Listen. I just want to say, Tennessee is having a sleeper free agency. I understand, the team's still trash, the O line is still trash, but I mean, Will Levis, in my opinion, showed some flashes last year. You go ahead and get Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, you get some guys around them. Like, I mean, they could honestly, take a next step to be somewhat better. This past season, like, they were a tough team to beat when they were at home. So
yeah,
Yeah, they the 2012 Brooklyn Nets. KG and Paul Pierce, they the receiver.
I think these moves are good on paper. I don't think it's going to transition to the field, but I do think, hey, shout out tomorrow, a shameless plug. Mock Draft 2.0 is coming out. I have them taking the tackle, and you got to keep Will Levis upright if you want to see him be anything here in the NFL. So go out there and get one of these tackles because you already got the weapons around him. Moving over to Austin Eckler, 2-year, $11 million deal, signs with Washington. Washington's had an underrated free agency. They just got Bobby Wagner yesterday. They have a lot of veterans coming in. But hey, I've seen some rumblings. Some people think this team could be this year's Texans if they draft Drake.
No way.
I mean, hey,
there's absolutely no way.
Bro, we have to think about it though. Nobody thought the Texans were going to be relevant this year. We thought they were going to win 4, 5, 6 games at max, and then they make the playoffs in their
defense. If Washington wins 4 to 5 games this year, I'll shave my hair off on the podcast.
Well, Amir, we're gonna have to keep them to that. That's a crazy statement. Zach Moss, though, 2 years, $8 million deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, this is the guy that last year with the Colts was
That's the Bengals logo.
Yes, he was huge for the Colts.
Logo that
of course, in the absence of Jonathan Taylor, but he career year for him, 200 total touches, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. He was a headache to play in fantasy football, but Zach Moss goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. Mike Evans stays home in Tampa Bay. There was a little bit of rumblings on where he would go, but a 2-year, $52 million deal to return to Tampa Bay. Career high, 13 touchdowns last year. I mean, not much to say. This dude is a 1,000-yard receiver each and every year, returns to where his career has been so legendary. Michael Pittman, 3-year, $46 million extension with the Colts. Huge for them. I mean, he had a career year as far as statistically, over 100 receptions, of just about 1,200 receiving yards. Another guy that was a headache to play in fantasy football, but they're just waiting on the return of Anthony Richardson. Gabe Davis signs a 3-year, $39 million deal with Jacksonville, replacing Calvin Ridley there for Sunshine. But I don't know. I'm not a big Gabe Davis fan. I don't think it's that much of an improvement. Calvin Ridley, like you mentioned there, Amir, 4-year, $92 million deal to form, to form a good duo there with DeAndre Hopkins. He stays in division, but goes to, of course, Tennessee. He had a down year last year, at least to expectations. But 29 years old, I guess I'll ask you guys this. Do you think it's too long of a contract for a 29-year-old coming off a down year?
I wouldn't say it's too long of a contract. It's too much of a contract, like as far as money wise. I mean, 4 years. I mean, it isn't bad. I mean, he sat out a year, so obviously, his body's probably feeling somewhat better from sitting out a year. And I think for Calvin Ridley, I mean, he still physically hasn't shown any signs of going down. I mean, if anything, physically he looks better. I mean, his route running is still elite. He still has great speed, great explosiveness. The only concern is, he just looks like he's not himself. Based off of this past year. And I mean, he had 1,000 yards receiving, but it really didn't feel like it. But I think
a lot of that came in like 3 games.
Right, exactly. And I think he comes into Tennessee. His production might go down slightly because he's going to be a number 2, but I mean, I think 4 years isn't too bad.
I think y'all underestimate Calvin Ridley, man. Don't underestimate somebody who just bet on themselves, man. I think this is somebody who, he obviously bet on himself, and so we'll see where he ends up out the league or wherever he ends up in 4 years. So no, I'm playing, but I think personally, I think 4 years was too much. I think if you would have stayed in that probably like guaranteed 2 with a 3rd year or something like that, it would have been a lot better. Just because of the fact that he is 29 and he doesn't look himself. He did have 1,000 yards last year, but like you both said, it didn't feel like it. I think if you say, hey, we'll give you your money up front on these 2 years, and then you'll see how you play, and we'll see how you play after that second year and make that decision about the third year. I think that'd be a lot better. But I mean, hey,
Yeah.
let's see.
Right. I think what the NFL needs to do is adapt the NBA mindset when it comes to contracts to give them a 2+1. Bakari, I'm giving everybody a 1+1. Hey, you gonna come in? I'm gonna sign you for a cheap deal, and you're gonna prove it to me. And then
Hey,
if
that
I
team
want
option,
to,
baby.
yeah, team option. If I want to bring you back, I'm gonna do that. I think that'd be perfect for Calvin Ridley.
Hey, yeah, I'll give you. Hey, yeah, I'll opt into your team option year just to trade you, just
Yeah,
to let me
right.
be the player for this
Yeah, I'd
trade.
bring it back just to move him. But moving over, Darnell Mooney, 3-year, $39 million, career lows across the board last year. But again, we have to remember Justin Fields didn't play all the year last year. So Darnell Mooney, down year, but still in the athletic prime of his career. He joins Kirk Cousins, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and of course, Bijan Robinson. Should be a fun offense there in Atlanta. Dalton Schultz, 27 years old, but 3 years, $36 million. I think that's a bit expensive for me, but Houston has the money, so why not? His contract will be up by the time they have to pay CJ Stroud. But last year, solid year. Nothing to stand out, but I think his impact was definitely felt on the field. And of course, with Tank Dell being out until probably the midseason mark next year, he's going to have to take a step up. And I think the 3-year, $36 million proves that they believe he can do that. David,
I'm sorry. I don't think that was a bad deal for him, just because the impact he had on that team, especially CJ Stroud. Like, that was a safety blanket, especially early in the season. That's the only reason I don't think it was a like a crazy deal for him. And shoot, I mean, he had, I think, like 2 or 3 drop passes in that wild card game versus the Browns, where if he would have caught those, the score would have been even crazier. Because I mean, he was wide open with like nobody around him. He walk-in touchdowns. But I think for Dalton Schultz, especially on a team that needs stability on that offense, you just got Joe Mixon, another offensive weapon. I don't think that's a crazy deal for him.
Any additional thoughts, Amir, before we move on?
I agree 100% with Bakari. Dalton Schultz, kind of went to Houston. People kind of thought he was going to take a step back because he was on his Houston team, Houston offense, instead of playing with Dak. But I mean, he literally showed why he's still, a great tight end. And I think 3 years, $36 million is perfect for him.
No doubt about it. And when we talk about the offensive line, you're going to be, David Bakhtiari. You might be saying, hey, he didn't get signed by the Jets. Well, I'm going to guarantee you he will be signed by the Jets. This is a guy that's, I'll say this. We'll talk about it tomorrow on the mock draft. But what did the Jets need? They need another playmaker offensively because they already have the defense. They need they need some offensive tackles on the left and right side, and they need another playmaker. I think, of course, there's talks they might bring Mekhi Becton back for 1 more year, give him another shot, and hopefully he stays healthy. But on that left side, who is an all-pro level left tackle that just so happens to be best friends with Aaron Rodgers, and he happens to be on the market for relatively cheap? That's David Bakhtiari. He's going to go to the New York Jets and be that left tackle, that blindside guy for Aaron Rodgers, and he should sign for relatively cheap. So I think that gives him a lot more flexibility to grab a Rome Odunze or a Brock Bowers in the draft to really, make their offense that much more dangerous. It's just a match made in heaven. So, again, he was cut on Monday by the Packers for cap reasons, but a guy that should find his way over to New York. I think that'll be huge for them. Kevin Dotson, 3-year, $48 million deal per PFF. He was the 4th rated interior offensive lineman last year. Again, he stays in town for LA. They need some offensive line help. Robert Hunt, a guy that is known for his athletic receiving ability and flipping ability. But 5-year, $100 million deal. Carolina continues to build around Bryce Young, and he was the 14th rated interior offensive lineman last year per PFF. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, Chris Jones. I believe this was the actual first notification we got about free agency outside of Mac Jones, and this was Chris Jones. He signs a 5-year, $95 million extension to come back to the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, we talked about it last week. We all thought he was going to return. Any additional thoughts from Amir here about Chris Jones?
Chris Jones, ran arguably the greatest 40-yard dash of all time. This is a legendary interior D lineman who, I think Casey made the right move. He's a big part of this dynasty. A big part of the reason why they won in the playoffs, and I think it's the reason why they won that Super Bowl. In my opinion, I mean, he single-handedly saved 3 TDs by himself. His impact is felt in the game. I think, 5 years, $95 million. He honestly probably deserved a little more, in my opinion.
That's saying a lot just because he's already has the biggest contract for his position of all time. But Bakari, go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off.
I get why they did the 5-year deal to stretch that money out over a longer period of time. But I mean, to me, it's Chris Jones. He's going to be dominant. But I probably would have gave him like a 4-year deal. 5 years it would be 34.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're not going to be expecting as much out of him at 34 as you are like right now. But once again, it's Chris Jones. It's not like you're going to go wrong. Giving him the money he deserves. Yeah, because his impact is so great, especially when you need him to be.
Yeah, I just hope he's a little bit more flexible with his contract, especially if this team wants to continue to compete. Paying him that much money, especially if his play down or decreases, you're going to need that extra cap flexibility. So hopefully he works with the team. Justin Madubuike, 26 years old, 4-year, $98 million extension to stay in Baltimore. He was really a nobody. And then last year came onto the scene and, had a career year. Of course, all-pro second team. You see his stats in the bottom left, killed it across the board. He returns to a team that looks to go back to the Super Bowl or try to go to the Super Bowl, right? Christian Wilkins, he did not get brought back by the Miami Dolphins. Instead, a 4-year, $110 million deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. Antonio Pierce going there and keeping that culture in Las Vegas or trying to rebuild it is huge. And then you bring in Christian Wilkins. I think it's really a culture setter. And him on that D-line with Mad Max Crosby, if I could speak, is dangerous. Again, career high 9 sacks last year from the interior. Pretty crazy. Leonard Williams, 3-year, $64 million extension. Nothing crazy here. Moving over to Daniel Hunter, a guy that was on the market just yesterday, but he signed with the Houston Texans. 2-year, $49 million deal. Crazy 2-year deal for him. But again, by the time his contract is up, you're going to have the flexibility to pay your younger stars. But 16.5 sacks, 23 tackle for losses last year.
Ooh.
Crazy. It seems like I had to look it up, but it was by far the most in the league. Again, career year across the board. Amir, any thoughts about this? And I guess your thoughts about Daniel Hunter joining Will Anderson on that dangerous Houston front.
He had a very underrated year last year, and looking at this year, this past year, every single year, us being Browns fans and us, rivaling Steelers fans, every year we're looking at the sack leaders, looking at T.J. Watt, Myles Garrett, and Hunter's always at the top of that list, and to have 16.5 sacks at 29 years old, nobody expected him to play that well, and I think he played good enough for him to get this contract, and now this Houston defense. Once they get like some other pieces in the secondary to help Stingley out, man, this defense is absolutely scary because the run defense is already elite this past year, and you add Hunter on the D line as well. This is scary. This is scary.
Yeah, this Texans team, it's like I'm trying to think. The best way to put it is like when you're building a 2K team, and then you go to player progression when you have a young team, and everybody's going up overall. So that's how this Texans team is. Like they were really good. They were good, better than expected last year. Obviously, making it to the second round of the playoffs. But, another year, same system, same coach, same fire, same energy, and you're bringing in even better pieces than you had the year before. Man, this Houston team, it's going to be very scary for years to come, in my opinion, especially when you have C.J. Stroud leading your team on offense. This team, the sky's the limit for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if they got Saquon, we've been talking about them as front runners. But again, maybe, hey, we'll talk about it next week, but maybe this team can be in the Super Bowl conversations next year. I think they're either going to be really good or they're going to underperform and have a lot of injuries. Zadarius Smith, 2-year extension for the Browns. Not a great year statistically, but again, he takes that pressure off of Myles Garrett. So I guess, hey, it's a good culture setter for the Cleveland Browns. Bryce Huff, underrated edge, of course, played for the Jets for many years. Kind of went under the radar because they just have such a good overall defense, but 10 sacks, 29 tackles, of course, 10 tackles for loss as well. Career year for him last year, and he gets a big contract for the Philadelphia Eagles. Kind of fills in for these aging Brandon Grahams of the world because they have the interior defensive line, but they need some help on the edge. Jonathan Greenard, or Grenard rather, 4-year, $76 million deal. I think that is a little bit of an overpay, but career year last year, as you see in the bottom left of your screen. And again, this is your Daniel Hunter replacement. Jalen Johnson at the cornerback position, 24 years old. He's just entering the prime of his career. And I think this is a huge re-signing for the Bears. 4-year, $76 million deal. 4 interceptions last year, was a Pro Bowler, and was all-pro second team. You can't get much better than that if you're the Bears and you bring him back. The Bears are going to look pretty good moving forward. Then Chidobe Awuzie. And this is one of those players that's like, For a guy that was such a big Bengals advocate last year, this is one of those losses that really hurt my argument to say, hey, the Bengals can go win the Super Bowl next year. This
Yeah.
is a guy that's very underrated. And again, his stats don't say it. But again, if you don't really have interceptions, that means either you're just that bad of a corner or nobody's throwing you the ball. And Awuzie, given a contract like this, you can tell it's not like he's a bad corner. People just don't throw at him. But 3 years, 25, I think is a steal for Tennessee. CJ Gardner-Johnson, Bakari, I'm going to let you take over here. 3-year, $33 million deal to return to Philly. You called it. We said you were crazy. But your thoughts here about CJ Gardner?
Yeah, no, I thought this would be a top priority for them. At least, getting some other pieces in that secondary, because we saw last year they were getting cooked. I mean, I don't know what the decisions were that led to C.J. Gardner, to them letting him go. I guess money situation, but it's a good thing you got him back, because that secondary really struggled last year. I mean, you traded for Kevin Byard. I mean, you had other pieces. You had the name talent there, but obviously it just didn't work out. So
Like
you bring back somebody who's been there. He went to the Super Bowl with them. I think this is what you needed. He's only 26 too, so he's significantly younger than the other pieces you had last year. But I think this is a good pickup for Philly. There are some people out there that want to say he didn't do anything for Detroit, but I don't think that that's true. I think that coming back to the Eagles is very beneficial for both him and the Eagles. So I think it's a good pickup for them.
Yeah, so for CJ, CJ this past year, he got a lot of hate, a lot of criticism for not, producing on a high level for Detroit, like people wanted him to. I mean, personally, CJ, first of all, he was hurt pretty much most of the year. He came back and instantly he had a complete culture change to this Detroit team. Everybody's wearing C's in the crowd. Everybody's hyped up when I'm on the field. And so obviously, you can see and feel his presence immediately. I think both sides won because, one, he got paid like he wanted to, and he goes back to Philly, the place he wanted to stay in beforehand. And personally, I thought the relationship between the two was completely cooked. I didn't think he would go back, but he did.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, he did. He goes back, to boost up the secondary like they needed to, because last year, can't be a repeat of what happened last year. And so I think, this made this Philly team back to where they were or close to it.
Yeah, I think Philly's back, no doubt about it. Tyrann Mathieu, 2-year, $13 million extension. Talk about a hometown discount to stay in his hometown in Louisiana for the New Orleans Saints. This is a guy that, hey, this is his last big contract, and he took a hometown discount. I guess it says a lot about the character of Tyrann Mathieu, but again, this is a guy that probably could have got, $30 or so million to add to his banking account, and he just decided, hey, I'd rather stay.
Why are you pocket watching, man?
I'm sorry?
Why are you pocket watching, man?
Look, man, I'm just saying he could have got more. And hey, after this contract, Tyrann Mathieu's probably done. I just think he could have got more. Of course, for I don't know, a good hometown discount. I guess he believes in Derek Carr to lead the ship. Kevin Byard, like you guys mentioned, 2-year, $15 million deal with the Chicago Bears. Did not look good at all for the Philadelphia Eagles last year. I guess he made some tackles. Guess that's something you could throw out there. I know his interception came on a Hail Mary. So, he didn't have a great year, but I mean, hey, he could be a good veteran for guys like Jalen Johnson and Tyree Stevenson. But moving over to the safety position, Xavier McKinney, a guy that I've seen a lot of mixed opinions about. A lot of guys love the signing for the Packers. A lot of people don't like it. Some Giants fans are kind of happy he's gone. But 4-year, $68 million deal, career year as far as statistics last year. Again, another guy that plays in the box, but when your safety has 116 tackles, your front seven's not doing the job. So he goes to the Green Bay Packers, and hopefully they can build a better defensive front so he doesn't have as much wear and tear on his body. But big contract for the young 24-year-old. But that is it for all the main signings. Of course, there's some other guys I forgot to mention, like Jameis Winston. I guess we mentioned him, or Naheem Hines, right? There's some other notable free agents that we didn't really mention. But let's talk about some guys that are still out there on the market. Ryan Tannehill, Josh Jacobs, Justin Fields. Of course, he's still out there, presumably, of course, through the trade market. But those are look at some of the top quarterbacks left. At the running back position, A.J. Dillon was signed this morning. I forget by who, but he was signed. J.K. Dobbins and Clyde Edwards-Helaire are still on the market. Your guys' opinion, do you think J.K. Dobbins can bounce back here? Because I believe he's had to deal with injuries.
I think JK is still, a good running back with injuries, like you just mentioned, injuries for a running back too, especially early on in your career. I mean, your body's only going to break down even more.
Yeah.
And so for JK, I mean, it's a huge concern. I think when he's healthy, yes, he'll bounce back. But I mean, it's hard for me to predict that when a guy is breaking down this early in his career.
I think he can bounce back because I guess the one thing you could take away from it is, yeah, even though he was injured, like he had 2 season-ending injuries back to back, they weren't football hits. I guess he wasn't out on the field
Right.
taking hits all for 17 games in the playoffs of a season, being a lead back. I guess when I think about it, yeah, those injuries are very concerning because, like I said, he missed 2 entire seasons because of them. But I think also the fact that he hasn't had the same amount of on the field wear and tear as some of the other backs his age. I think that's a silver shining when you get to JK because maybe he can if he can stay injury free, maybe he can just be a good serviceable back for some years because he doesn't have that same on field wear and tear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to see the Ravens. Well, as a Browns fan, I don't want to see him get it back. But from a personal perspective, I'd like the Ravens to bring him back on a 1-year deal, have him, be in the mix with Keaton Mitchell and Derrick Henry, and let him prove himself for another team next year. Or maybe he returns on a longer deal. But if not, I mean, hey, J.K. Dobbins, I'd prefer you over Jerome Ford. So if you want to come to Cleveland,
I prefer anybody over Jerome Ford.
yeah, you can stay in division. But let's look at the stacked receivers that are still left out there. You have Hollywood Brown, Mike Williams, which is a big name that was cut yesterday. Odell Beckham, of course, Tyler Boyd, Curtis Samuel, KJ Osborne, Michael Thomas, the slant man himself, DJ Chark, MVS, Paris Campbell, just to name about the top 10 remaining receivers. Amir, you can pick a receiver on this board and let me know, where do you think they would go or where do you think they should go to create, I guess, that extra edge for one of these offenses?
Oh, first of all, I know for a fact I was one of these receivers are going to KC. Now, which one is another question? But if I had to lean towards one,
Like,
looking at the state of this year, seeing guys, signing teams that's still in division, so they can play them twice a year. A guy that I'm leaning towards is Mike Will, and I talked about this yesterday. I think Mike Will, could very well end up going to KC, taking a discount, and this is a guy who's competitive every single year, who wants to win games, who wants to compete. And with the Chargers, he hasn't had that, sort of that help or that courtesy of being able to win. And so I think Casey will be perfect for him. He'll go there, be a true number one, and prove himself. To actually be a legitimate receiver rather than being in a guy like beating a guy like what you call a shadow. I'm blanking right now, but you know what I mean.
it'll come back to you. But Bakari,
Keenan Allen.
oh, I'm sorry?
Keenan Allen.
Keenan Allen. But Bakari, I'll ask you the same question. Pick a receiver on the board and let me know where you think or you would like to see them go.
All right, I'm gonna pick Hollywood Brown, and I'm gonna put him in my. I'm gonna look in the future right now. Do some stuff. The Browns. No, I'm playing. I when I look at Hollywood, if he doesn't go back to the Cardinals, the team I would like to see him on is the Chicago Bears. You're going to get Caleb Williams. You have DJ Moore. You lost Darnell Mooney. I think the Bears will be a good fit for him because he's gonna be somebody. He's been in the league for a few years now, so you can get Caleb Williams to throw the ball. He knows what he's doing. You have your opposite of DJ Moore, so it's not like when you were in Baltimore and you were expected to be that number one receiver. You have a good mix of, you kind of know, like yin and yang. He's a smaller, faster receiver. So I think I'd like to see him in Chicago because why not?
Yeah, I think there's some underrated receivers on this board like Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd, and of course guys like KJ Osborne, guys that are very solid players in their own right. But I mean, hey, Michael Thomas, hey, you want to come to Cleveland, right? Be a red zone threat. No, I think Odell Beckham is a guy I wanted to. I'll touch on here. A guy that I would actually like to see a reunion there with Sean McVay. I think that'd be crazy with Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham, and Puka Nacua. I think that'd be a crazy trio there in Los Angeles. But if
You
not,
said the best receiver in the league.
Cooper Kupp is far past that mantra.
Puka.
Like Puka.
Puka, he's got to be the number one on his team before he can be the number one in the league. Moving over to the tackles, if you guys care, Tyron Smith, Trent Brown, two guys that still can be signed by some of these veteran teams that need a winner. Mekhi Becton, of course, had a lot of injury concerns. Jonah Williams sucks. Connor Williams is a center, the best center left, but of course he's going to be out with injury until probably later in the year, later into next season. And Kevin Zeitler for the Ravens, of course, is still on the market. He'll probably end up returning on a hometown discount. On the defensive side of the ball, DJ Reader is a huge free agent, still out there. The Bengals, of course, I don't know if they can bring him back. I think they would have by now, but if they can't, he's going to be a huge addition elsewhere come to Cleveland. Chase Young, Calais Campbell, I don't know if he's going to retire. He should. He's like 39 years old. Chase Young, we don't know where he's going to go. But of course, he still has a lot of untapped potential if he actually puts in the effort. Linebackers, Bobby Wagner, Jerome Ford. You guys see the names. Isaiah Simmons, very interesting name. I know in Madden, he'd be the first free agent gone.
I thought Bobby Wagner went to the Commanders.
Yeah. That's why he's great out here. I was going to talk about.
My fault. I can't see colors.
Bobby Wagner, he did sign with the Commanders, as Bakari just mentioned. But these bottom three still out there, and they can sign with, of course, a plethora of teams. The DBs, you see Stephon Gilmore, Kendall Fuller, your cornerbacks. Micah Hyde and Eddie Jackson really highlight the safeties here that are still on the market. Right there with the guys like Cam Curl and Julian Blackman. But Micah Hyde, I think, is the biggest name on this board. Interesting to see where he goes. Maybe a team like Cleveland. No, I'm just joking. But interestingly, I'm interested to see where he goes. Maybe a team like Green Bay that desperately kind of needs a safety after losing Darnell Savage and their other guy that I can't think of at the moment. But that is really going to do it. Amir, any last thoughts before we get out of here? That's the good, bad, and ugly from the first stretch of free agency here.
Not much, I think coming up soon we'll see some more trades, big trades, and hopefully the Browns could, still grab, another receiver. I know it's asking for a lot, but I want to really open up this offense because the AFC North at this point, the whole entire division might finish 10-7 at this point.
Yeah. Bakari, your thoughts here before we get out of here. And you actually, before Amir, I forgot to mention Justin Simmons is still out there. I forgot to mention him, but he's still a huge free agent. He might be the biggest free agent actually out there still. So Justin Simmons, it's rumored though he's going to go to Pittsburgh. Hopefully not. Bakari, any last thoughts before we get out here? I know you're going to be back Tuesday for some more Brandon Miller hype.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. Obviously this free agency has been the craziest in recent memory probably ever. And it's only going to be crazier with the draft approaching. We hear more stories coming from the draft, more trades coming from the draft. It'll only be crazier. I'm still excited, or I still want to see where Justin Fields lands because I think that would be very interesting to kind of see the landscape of like how these teams are thinking because right now you either have a star quarterback or you have a bridge quarterback. So, I think a lot of these teams I think teams now are more devoted into, kind of developing their backups to one day take over that starting role. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get out of here, follow the socials in the top right of your screen, of course, all under the same tag. And next week, we're going to have some March Madness predictions. We're going to have some NFL power rankings, Amir, going into next season. We should have a lot of fun. I should have some more draft content. I have a mock draft dropping tomorrow. And next week, I might talk about some of my favorite prospects. But that is going to do it here for today's video. Until next week, stay happy, stay healthy. We're out of here.